Homo sapiens. Human cultures began to take shape about 70,000 years ago. There have been three major revolutions in human history: the cognitive revolution, the agricultural revolution, and the scientific revolution. Prehistoric humans, 2 million years old or so, were no more important and impressive than other mammals. Homo sapiens means wise man. Humans first evolved in Africa about 2.5 million years ago. The author believes it is unlikely Homo sapiens will survive for another 1,000 years. From about 2 million years ago until 10,000 years ago, multiple human species roamed the earth together. The depiction of man evolving from hunched over to upright incorrectly displays human evolution as a linear trajectory. In fact, the species lived simultaneously. Humans have huge brains for their body size. Human brains account for 2 to 3% of body size, but use 25% of energy. Humankind was very much in the middle of the food chain until 400,000 years ago and didn't leap to the top of the food chain until 100,000 years ago. Most animals at the top of the food chain made it there gradually over millions of years. Humans, however, jumped to the top relatively rapidly. This means that the rest of the food chain wasn't ready, and neither were we. Hence we feel anxious and stressed because we aren't used to being at the top. The advent of fire and cooking food may have opened the way for the evolution of a smaller intestinal tract and a larger brain. There are two theories of how Homo sapiens evolved: interbreeding theory and replacement theory. The reality is probably a combination of both theories. Perhaps this is why Homo sapiens wiped out the Neanderthals. They were too familiar to ignore, but too different to tolerate. The last dwarf species of humans died out 12,000 years ago. Homo sapiens conquered the world because of its unique language. The cognitive revolution occurred between 70,000 to 30,000 years ago. It allowed Homo sapiens to communicate at a level never seen before in language. As far as we know, only Homo sapiens can talk about things we have never seen, touched, or smelled. Think religions, myths, legends, and fantasies. The telling of myths and stories allow Homo sapiens to collaborate in large numbers in extremely flexible ways. This separates us from all other animals. Chimps can't form groups of more than 50 or so. For humans, the group size is usually 150 or so. Beyond that, you can't rely on gossip and personal communication. You need something more to get large numbers of people working together. Large numbers of people can collaborate by sharing common myths and beliefs. In academic circles, stories are known as fictions, social constructs, or imagined realities. An imagined reality is not a lie because the entire group believes it. Ever since the cognitive revolution, humans have been living in a dual reality: the physical reality and the imagined reality. The way people cooperate can be changed by changing the stories as myths we tell. Because Homo sapiens shared myths were not genetically based, they could adapt and change their behavior as soon as they adapted their new belief. They didn't have to wait millions of years for a genetic change. Homo sapiens are the only animals that conduct trade. As far as we know, the humans of 30,000 years ago had the same physical, emotional, and intellectual capabilities that we have today. Evolutionary psychology claims that most of our psychology was developed during the period before the agricultural revolution about 10,000 years ago. The instinct to gorge on high-calorie food is wired into our DNA. Ever since the agricultural revolution, there hasn't been one predominant way of life for all humans. There have only been options from a variety of cultures. The dog was the first animal domesticated by humans around 15,000 years ago. In ancient human groups, over 10,000 years ago, there was very little privacy, but also very little loneliness. Most of our ancient ancestors had much wider and deeper knowledge of their physical surroundings than we do. They were not unintelligent at all. The human collective today knows far more overall than the whole population of 15,000 years ago. However, at the individual level we are much more specialized today. Ancient foragers were the most knowledgeable and skillful people in history. It is far easier to pass unremarkable genes along today than it was 10,000 years ago. Our lack of knowledge about prehistoric religions and beliefs is one of the biggest holes in our understanding of human history. Humans traveling across the sea and landing in Australia was one of the most important expeditions in history. It marked the moment humans cemented themselves at the top of the food chain. Homo sapiens first made it to America about 16,000 years ago. The settling of America across the Siberian Peninsula through Alaska into Canada and the United States down through Mexico, and Central America into the Andes and the Amazon and all the way to the tip of South America was one of the most rapid and incredible invasions by a single species the world had ever seen. Incredibly, the agricultural revolution sprang up independently in many different parts of the world. There is no evidence modern humans have become more intelligent with time. The agricultural revolution actually didn't make the life of the average human better at first. It did, however, allow humans to collect more food per unit area, and thus the overall population multiplied exponentially. Fascinatingly, the first few thousand years of the agricultural revolution actually made life harder for humans by creating more work, less leisure, and a ballooning population that created more mouths to feed. Each individual generation didn't see how their life was becoming worse because the small changes were so tiny. One of history's few iron laws is that luxuries tend to become necessities and to spawn new obligations. Once people begin to enjoy new luxuries, they tend to become expected and then count on them. The evolutionary success of the agricultural revolution, greater population, was actually cause for much suffering on the individual level. Not just for humans, but for domesticated animals like cows, sheep, and chickens as well. The advent of the agricultural revolution marked the time when worries of the future became prevalent: the weather, the crop yield this year, etc. The myths that surround us and make up our lives dictate so much of what we believe and what we do. Like the ancient Egyptians, most people dedicate their lives to building pyramids. It's just that the names, shapes, and sizes of the pyramids change from one culture to another. In order to change the imagined order, you must first find a group that believes in a current imagined order. New myths must build upon or evolve from previous myths. The main purpose of writing is to record numbers, which our brains did not evolve to manage well. Our brains are much better at remembering biological, zoological, and social information. There is an ancient writing system used by the Incas known as a quipu. They are not written words at all, but a series of knots of different colors and strings that represent words and numbers. Writing has actually changed the way humans think. We can use writing and record keeping to think far more categorically than ever before. Numbers are the world's most prevalent language. Social hierarchies, inequality, and so on are human inventions. Most rich people are rich because they were born into rich families. Most poor people are poor because they were born into poor families. Unjust discrimination often gets worse, not better, with time. As of 2006, there were still 53 countries where a husband could not be legally prosecuted for raping his wife. When it comes to gender inequality, biology enables, culture forbids. The idea of unnatural behaviors is actually a result of Christian theology, not biology. If it is possible biologically, then it is natural. From a scientific perspective, two men having sex is natural. Traveling at the speed of light is not natural. Why are men valued in many cultures more than women? All human cultures are filled with inconsistencies. For example, America currently values individual freedom and equality. But these two ideals don't always play nicely. It is part of the human experience to reconcile them. These inconsistencies aren't necessarily bad. They force us to think critically. Consistency is the playground of dull minds. History is moving relentlessly toward unity. The whole planet is moving toward one world culture. The creation of money was purely an intellectual revolution. It doesn't exist except in our minds. More than 90% of all money is just electronic data, not physical money. Everyone always wants money precisely because everyone else always wants money. Empires have been the world's most common form of political organization for the last 2,500 years. In general, empires do not fall because of uprisings. They almost always succumb to outside invasion or splits from within the empowered class.